So I've been an Airbnb host for about 15 years, and here's how I got started. Back in 2009, 2010, I attended South by Southwest. I decided at the last minute to attend in Austin. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with South by Southwest, at that time, it was a huge gathering conference that started for music, but also extended to the tech community. And I was working in events and marketing at the time and was interested in the activations that were happening there. But I digress. That aside, I decided last minute to go to South by Southwest, and I couldn't find a hotel room. I could barely find a flight. But there was this thing, Airbnb, that was just coming onto the scene where you could rent a room in somebody's house. And there was actually a promotion with South by Southwest where both the host would receive a $25 bonus as well as the guest would receive a $25 credit towards their stay. And so I booked an Airbnb. And so it was a bedroom in an apartment, an extra bedroom where a young woman had the apartment. And so I attended that. When I got back, I thought, wow, this is a great idea. Why don't I rent out the extra bedroom in our house and do that? Well, it turns out it was a flop. Nobody booked. Our house was probably not in the best location. We were just on the fringe of Niagara and Hamilton. Not a huge tourist destination, but I thought I could ultimately rent the room out. At that time, also, Airbnb was still a new platform for a lot of people and wasn't nearly as widespread as it is today. So that failed, and I pivoted, and we actually ended renting out the room to a student long term anyway. So that was my first foray into Airbnb. And then I lay dormant for about, let's say, 10 years before my next Airbnb adventure. Now let's talk about Airbnb venture number 2. So this was in 2021. And as you recall, in Canada, we were half on lockdown, half not lockdown, depending on the region and the area. And people started wanting to get away out of the city. And Airbnbs was actually a pretty popular vacation solution for people to get out of their homes and go somewhere else. So I decided to buy an Airbnb in a beach community on Lake Erie. And so at that time, I bought it in the winter of 2021, winter, early spring. And at that time, we didn't know if the beach was actually even going to be open to the public. And so after I bought it, it was open, not open. You needed passes. It was unclear whether there were passes just for local residents or if visitors would be able to get a pass or not. And so I went headfirst into buying a property in this beach community with the expectation that the beach would be open in the summer. So by the time I took possession, and furnished the house completely with furniture bought on Facebook Marketplace. And so that was a reasonable way to get it up and running quickly at a relatively low cost. Now, it did involve a lot of driving around and picking up furniture and getting it there, but I ultimately launched in the early spring of 2021. Here's the challenge, though. Also at that time, as people wanted to get out of the cities, they started moving further and further outside. And so housing prices in the market where I bought my beach house were actually starting to increase. And I was getting some bookings for the summer. But it was still unclear whether the beach would be open to the public or not. And people who were making bookings were asking me, is the beach going to be open? Is there going to be access? What does access look like? And I couldn't really tell them. In the midst of all that turmoil, housing prices went up so much that I ultimately decided to flip the property. So before I sold the property, I had only maybe a handful of bookings, but I was able to sell it at a profit, fully furnished, to somebody else who wanted to run a vacation rental property. So fast forward a year later, my intent at the time, once I sold that property, was to find another Airbnb property in a town closer to more attractions, not strictly a beach community, to get more year-round traffic. And so it took me a year to find that next property, and it was a bit of a fixer-upper. And it took some time to renovate. You're actually looking at that property now. I should tell you that the objective behind my investment in Airbnb properties is ultimately a retirement investment. So my idea was, well, for the next few years, the Airbnb income would help pay the mortgage and cover the costs of the property while I continued to work. And then at some point in time in the future, when I'm ready to fully retire and slow down, I can move into that property and it will be close to paid for. So next, let me tell you about the journey of getting this property up and running. So first, the property was a bit of a mess, and there was a lot of work that had to be done. And I had a 3-month time horizon. So you remember the first property I bought in late winter, early spring, with the intent of getting it up and running by the summer season. That was much easier for that property because it had already been updated. This property, though, required a lot more work, and frankly, a lot more work than I expected. So what originally was a 3-month timeline to get it up and running for the summer season turned into almost a year and a half. The reason the renovation took so long is for a couple of reasons. Number one, my partner and significant other is a general contractor who specializes in home renovations, but his crew and his business is an hour and a half away. So it's not very easy to get those resources down here to work on this property. Number two is we had to find some local tradesmen to undertake some of the work. And that was a challenge, finding good, skilled, qualified subcontractors to handle elements. The third is disagreements between me and my partner on design changes. So, for example, I thought it would be a freshen up with some minor changes. We actually ended up putting a new bathroom on the second floor, removing a full bathroom on the main floor, putting in a powder room on the main floor, removing the complete staircase from the first floor to the second floor and replacing it with an open concept staircase, lofting the living room, as well as replacing a lot of the external windows. Not to mention, when we opened up walls, we found hidden windows that had to be taken care of, covered, removed, etc. We also found within the walls, behind the drywall, were massive, massive wasps' nests in some areas that also had to be removed. So it seemed like at every corner, every turn, when we would remove something to try and fix it or repair it, it uncovered a whole bunch of new problems. Finally, we had to meet the requirements of our town, which had short-term rental licensing. So to be a short-term rental within this community, you have to meet certain criteria with regards to parking, number of bedrooms relative to number of parking spots, fire exits and escape, elements like those which have to be met. So that involved changing some windows, expanding some windows, and widening the driveway to accommodate the number of vehicles for the number of bedrooms that we have here. But ultimately, we launched in the summer of 2023, and it has been going well ever since. From a financial perspective, The house is covered by Airbnb income, including the mortgage, all utilities, cleaning, and maintenance is covered by the Airbnb income. So it's a growing investment ultimately for my retirement. Look, I'm not trying to be some kind of Airbnb mega mogul with properties all over the world. I did look seriously at Airbnb arbitrage for a while, but I've seen a lot of people get stuck in dicey circumstances. This particular investment works for me because it's relatively close to where I live. Number two, it's my hometown, so I have infrastructure. My brother does some of the property management. And three, it provides a bit of a getaway for me to use as a studio and a quiet place to study, reflect, and work on creative projects. Whatever your objective, I think Airbnbs provide a good side hustle to add to your portfolio life. If you have any questions about Airbnb management in general, I'd be happy to address them in a future video. Leave your comments below and tell me what you're interested in learning about, and I'll be happy to share.